So welcome to the 8th in Cybersecurity Monthly Tips, and this one is called Dark Web Defenders. So far this year, we've tackled a number of topics, starting in March with security assessments and technology policy, basically starting off with a bit of a datum of where we're going to work from, and looking at the policy and how you choose a business-oriented policy to drive your cybersecurity. Remember, this is meant to help your business, not cause your business more problems, so aligning the two makes a lot of sense. April, we jumped into passwords and multi-factor authentication, and in May, we looked at protecting data for remote users as COVID kicked off. In June, we looked at business continuity and backup, generally the last port of call before you end up losing your data completely, and how important that is for a business to make sure they're covered, not just with their server online, but also looking at some of their cloud assets as well and ensuring they're backed up across that. In July, we looked at firewalls and next generation AV and how these have progressed over the years and moved into a product called threat detection and response, or endpoint detection and response, which basically looks at not necessarily a signature of a known virus and then saying, does it match, but how a piece of software actually works with your computer and whether it's doing anything malicious. In August, we looked at detecting and tracking events using SIEM or SIEM, which is a way to just provide that history of what went on in fairly good detail, so you can track whether someone came in through a firewall, what systems they went through, what data they looked at, and the hopes of that is to minimize how much of that data they touched, or at least see what they did touch, and then talk to only those people that were affected. In September, we went into patching and Internet of Things. And in this, we had a look at patching your computers is great. Patching the software on them, not just the operating system, is even better. But don't forget all those other things on your network. And we looked at how a fish tank thermometer brought down a casino. Today, we're going to be looking at dark web scanning and security awareness training as part of our Dark Web Defenders. Next month, we'll be looking at email anti-spam and the protections we can get on your email before it gets to you. And in December, we'll be finishing up with incident response and insurance, looking at what you do when you've been hit and how you can get back up and running as quickly as possible. So what are we going to be talking about today? So today we'll be looking at what is the dark web. We've seen enough sci-fi movies out there like Swordfish where it's portrayed, and we're going to delve a bit deeper into it and hopefully unveil a little bit of what it is and maybe give you a bit of an idea of why it's important to your business from a cybersecurity perspective. We'll also be looking at security awareness training and how you can provide the necessary information and skills to your staff so that they can protect you and your business and also protect themselves outside of your business as well. And lastly, we'll be ending with some tips on ways to protect your organization so moving forward, you're in a good position. So why are we here? This year has certainly been an eventful one. The FBI said that moving from office working to remote working had increased the number of cybersecurity incidents by 300% during COVID. In April, Zoom had a breach and managed to lose 500,000 Zoom accounts, which were subsequently found on the dark web. Zoom unfortunately didn't report this in April, and it's taken a few months for it to be reported back through. Looking at the dark web itself and some of the sales on there, the largest one on record is 773 million unique records. That's usernames and passwords for a very large number of people across a very large number of things. But there are, I guess, a very huge amount of smaller ones that pop up, but that one called Collection 1 has certainly been the biggest that's ever come across. The OAIC reported between January and June 2020 that data breaches for criminal or malicious attacks had gone up to 317 breaches, which is certainly a fairly good increase. So we'll be interested to see how the rest of this year plays out from that as well, looking at Australia-specific statistics. And lastly, the median annual return on security awareness training is about 5 times. So it's one of the most effective ways to train your staff. So it's definitely something worth looking into. So looking at the stats and the breaches specific to Australia from the OAIC, we can see that cyber incidents account for the largest. These are things like phishing attacks and losing your credentials through a third party and things like that. Rogue employee insider threat is still a reasonable chunk, along with theft of paperwork or data storage devices. That includes USB keys or leaving your laptop in the car, like the Hawthorne's CEO did, losing their entire database and breaching last year. Also, social engineering and impersonation is a reasonable chunk. It's worth keeping an eye on that there, because it's easy for someone to pretend to be someone else and come in, or have an Office 365 account hacked, and then they start emailing pretending to be the CEO and telling some of the admin staff or pays people to sit there and pay things into accounts that they shouldn't, which has certainly been a fairly common way of breaching Office 365. One of the things to keep in mind here is specific to the legal sector, cyber incidents and social engineering were the only reported attack vectors. This means that the legal sector is certainly at risk for phishing attacks and loss of their credentials through third parties as probably their biggest vector, and something that needs to be looked at. This is something I think that's important for law firms and lawyers. There are definitely a number of ways to be attacked, but having a phishing attack and losing your credentials that way, or having your credentials lost through a third party and having them be the same as what you use for your business, those are probably the two biggest risks that we'll be looking at, and ones that we can discuss further as we go along. So how does this fit into the NIST Cybersecurity Framework? Well, throughout these cybersecurity tips, we've used the NIST Cybersecurity Framework to basically drill down on the areas that we're looking to tackle as each stage. And we believe this one covers quite a few. When you're looking at the dark web and protecting from that, as well as the security awareness training, you can see protect, detect, and respond are all covered there. So this is why looking at security awareness training specifically, it has a really high return on investment. But what exactly is the dark web? Well, you see, the surface web, as they call it, that's the internet as people generally refer to it. Google website, news.com.au, all those sort of things that you can readily get by bringing up a browser such as Chrome or Safari, typing something in and just going and browsing through things. Next up, we have the deep web. This is basically where the bulk of the information in the world is kept. It's generally internal to businesses, or in the academic world, you have a number of databases that can get through with a password. You could argue that with AFR paywalling their services now, that they are moving from the surface web to the deep web and are basically holding that information behind their paywall for people to get into. But this does include a lot. I mean, you've got law firms with legal documents and cloud systems that are part of the deep web or on their servers. You've got financial records or medical records. You've also got things like government resources and how they're kept. So this is all that information that isn't easily Googled, but is effectively on the internet, because we're talking about computers that are connected to a network that connects to the internet. So it can be, got to if you like, but generally has a number of steps to get through, say as remoting in or through a paywall or something like that. And at the bottom, what accounts for 6% of all available information? Keep in mind that the surface web, or what you normally class as the internet, is 4%, so it's 50% bigger, is the dark web. So this is information that's generally kept in encrypted sites on the Tor network or similar sorts of things, which aren't easy to get to, aren't easy to log in, require generally a higher technical knowledge to get to and a number of things to get through it. But the dark web doesn't necessarily just have that in it. They say, places like Silk Road, where people can go and purchase things, whether it be an assassination through to drugs or anything in between. But there's also a number of other things there. If you're a whistleblower and you're putting your information up, you generally use a dark web service or something similar to put it on. But there could be literally anything in there. And that's just the thing to keep in mind, that this is quite broad. It's not necessarily all illegal activities, but there's certainly a number of things there. So I guess, what is for sale on the dark web? Well, as you could probably guess, the number one thing is drugs, people going on there to buy weed and things like that. But also they've got personal data, financial data. There's places that have guides and things like that to tell you how to do these things. And there's also software available, software available to help you attack various people, or even services available that will do it on your behalf and will take a cut of it. So personal data can be anything from your music streaming account to a credit report, your health records. We look at our e-health record here and the 42 breaches it had in its first year. You'll probably find that a bunch of your health records are actually out on the deep web there. On the dark web there, if you actually had them in e-health. But you've also got, a lot more financial records as well. So whether it be just some personal details like your date of birth and your credit history, that is a financial, information that's there, or it could be full PLL and things like that, or it could be your credit card details. So there's certainly a lot of things there that are available for people. This would be the number one place someone could go and get a bunch of credit card data and say buy 10,000 different credit cards that have been stolen, and then make their own credit cards and go and see if they can get any money out of those. So looking at guides and templates in the software and fraud services, this is where the sort of training comes in when you're a hacker and looking to find out how to do it. There are places like the dark web forum there, and this is also where passwords have been lost and sold. They can have them up there or given away for free. Here's a bunch of passwords and usernames that we've come across. Feel free to do whatever you want with it. But this can include step-by-step tutorials, how to do phishing, business email compromise, or ways that you can attack Office 365. Pretty much anything. There'll be someone who's written something about it, trying to tell you how you can do it as well. So it's something to keep in mind. And a lot of these are presented free. There's some that you can pay for, so people can get more information. Also in the software and fraud services, you can literally buy someone's ability to hack you. If you've ever got an email saying we're giving away free backup to Office 365, just click here and get your month's free backup or similar, that's often a fraud service that's basically designed to send that out. You give them a list of passwords and usernames, and they will go and basically send to everyone in that list and see what they can get, and they'll take a percentage of that, normally 20 to 30%. So they, for a fee, can basically go down and do that. But you can buy pretty much anything. I mean, this is where that services can be anything from finding someone's driver's license through to, maybe someone's looking to get a hit on someone. There's been a bunch of high-profile sales, if you like, from the Silk Road, that were put up there as part of the dark web, that have given a bit of notoriety. But you can, buy all the tools of the trade, all the information required, or even outsource it entirely to someone else. So there is a lot of things available on the dark web, not just the sale of your username and password, but also the necessary tools and information to do what they need to do. So I guess, where are they getting all that data from? Malware is certainly the first port of call. If you've been sent an email and you've clicked on a link to download it, often the software that comes down that runs will grab a bunch of stuff from your computer and upload it somewhere else. And that can include all the websites you've visited, so your internet history, any passwords that are cached in the system. If you've got a password tool on the computer that was open at the time, it may be able to grab from that as well. So this is where protecting from Trojans, it's certainly an important thing. And there are a number that will also put backdoors in so that these people can come back at a later date and grab a bit more information and also have a bit of a look around. And often they do that for a fairly long time. The stats are currently sitting at over 200 days in your system before they do anything. Ransomware is, I guess, one of the biggest things that's been out there for businesses in terms of impact. Ransomware is a piece of malware that basically encrypts all your data, and you generally have to pay someone to get it back. But often these come through visiting either a compromised website or through an email, whether it's an attached malware or directs you via a phishing attack to somewhere else to download it. You've got baiting, and baiting is basically leaving, I guess, items such as USB keys or similar in public places, or providing free Wi-Fi to get onto get people to get on, and therefore uploading malware via that. So it's generally a way to offer something for somebody in order for them to get a piece of malware in return. So it's a tactic that's generally used probably as a last resort, although if you're Starbucks in the US, where 600 of your stores were part of a Wi-Fi compromised attack, where a device called a Wi-Fi pineapple was put in the stores, and basically these things connect to their Wi-Fi in the store and then connect all the devices that come into it and allow you to upload, as they did, a crypto generating piece of software as part of the browser payload. So anyone who had a browser open, it was basically using their CPU to generate cryptocurrency, which is kind of smart. But at the same time, I think a lot of people found out because their CPUs were going 100% when in these stores. So that's basically how they baited people into using that and generating income for them. And last is business email compromise there. That's basically where they either have a domain name that looks very similar or have actually compromised your Office 365 or Gmail and are sending out as you to various people in order to get them to either do phishing or something similar. We've had a number of law firms who have lost money when it comes to settling any property transfer, and have gone through that conveyancing process, and on the last bit have transferred to bank accounts that have been changed and things like that. So the easiest way to get around business email compromise is to actually pick up the phone and ring someone and have a chat to them. So you have phishing and spear phishing. And there's also whaling, which I'm going to throw in here as well. So these are attacks to try to get information from people. Phishing is usually just seen as an email that's done in bulk to a number of people. You've probably all seen the one that comes through that says there's a parcel waiting for you. Click here to get the details about it, or here's the invoice. Click here to find out what it is so you can pay for it. Those are what would be called phishing attacks. Spear phishing attacks are generally targeted to a specific individual, where they may have gone through your LinkedIn or your Facebook or the Facebook of your friends and got a bit of information, and then have targeted you specifically with information that makes it look like it's real. Like maybe your auntie you haven't talked to in a few years that you comment on your Facebook, I wish they'd get in contact, emails you now, and that's a spear phishing attack because it's so targeted to try to get you. And they often work because of that too. Most people aren't really expecting it. Whaling, which I'm going to throw in here, is also an attack, but that's aimed at generally CEOs or directors of businesses, where they know that the information that they are able to access is generally of a high quality, generally worth more, and is something that's of more value to them as a hacker. And they'll tend to go after those, generally with a spear phishing attack, but very much after those whales, if you like, in order to get that information. Vishing and smishing. I'm sure we've all had it on SMSs, so we've all probably been smished before. Basically, it's just an SMS attack where they send a message through, and they may have a link in there to click on here and go to do X, Y, and Z. It's pretty unlikely that Amazon, for example, has your mobile number and is going to send you a text, but it's something to keep in mind. Vishing attacks are ones where they ring you up. You've probably had relatives before or heard about it, where people have rung up and saying that, hey, we're from Microsoft, we're here to fix your computer problem. And people will go, what problem? And they'll go, oh, your computer reported an issue. We're going to send you an email with a link. If you could just open that up to let us on to fix it, we'll be able to solve it. And unfortunately, there's been a number of elderly people who have lost a lot of money through this, where they've then basically used it to get on to all their bank accounts and steal their money. And lastly, we have the waterhole attack. So this is a targeted attack that basically looks at infecting websites that people know they've, I guess, frequently visited ones. I know of a number of government websites, both here and overseas, that have been attacked this way, where they'll get onto that website and they'll compromise it, and they'll know that they'll get a lot of traffic through, and they'll try to bring it down. Government websites are pretty good for this because generally they're not very well protected and they're visited by a lot of people. So that's I guess, a number of ways that criminals are getting your username and password, which is the information that they're trying to get here. So that brings us into, I guess, what do we do about it? So security awareness training is definitely one of the main things that we can look at that will make a massive difference to your security posture as a business and as an individual. Security awareness training is basically a formal process where we go through and either in person or whether it be through videos and questionnaires, we basically provide that information there of, what to look for in an attack, things to do before you just click on links, and just provide that sort of underlying training so that you can assess something before you do it. And usually it stops people doing things that are going to compromise them. So as it says there, 2/3 of malware is 0-day. That means that AV doesn't know about it, and it's never been through a product that's been able to assess it as being malware before, hence the 0-day. The world has zero knowledge of it, and that number has been increasing over the last few years, and it gets bigger and bigger every year that we come and look at this. So if you think that the average piece of software, antivirus, firewall, has never seen 2/3 of what runs through it, it doesn't even know if it's malware. There are tools that are getting smarter, don't get me wrong. There's certainly a technological approach here, but also combining that with the human approach of security awareness training will help block these risks. And it's something that I think that needs to be done on a regular basis. We definitely recommend something monthly, even if it's small. A 5-minute video with a little questionnaire at the end of it once a month is something that's going to make a difference. You can do in-person one where we've gone into businesses and sat down for a couple hours. We've done a bit of a PowerPoint on some of the things to look at and some of the things to do, followed up with questions afterwards. But we think that if you do any of these things, you want to augment it with the simulated phishing attacks. So this is generally how they're trying to get information, is through sending through emails and stuff like that. So we follow them up, and we generally do a simulated phishing attack to test the effectiveness of the training, and it allows us to drill down on individuals that may need more training, or at least show that we've got some value out of what we're doing. But definitely, as it says there, a good training program should be providing concise, actionable, and memorable advice about how to reduce these risks. So as long as at the end of it, people can remember and people know what they're going to do and know how to move forward and start actually doing that, that's when we find that the security awareness training has made a good impact to a business. So as it says, 91% use security awareness to reduce cybersecurity risk related to user behavior. 64% use it to change user behavior. 61% use it to address regulatory requirements, and we've actually seen that increasing over the years as more and more places, whether it be industry bodies, the government, or upstream suppliers, are requiring that as part of whatever compliance need that the business needs to be part of. And 55% use it to comply with internal policies. As it says there in the stat that's been pulled up from the OAIC, 34% or a third is human error, 61% is malicious or criminal activity, and that includes phishing attacks or lost credentials through third parties, which are the two biggest areas in that, and only 5% is a system fault or hardware failure or similar. So it's worth keeping in mind that security awareness training really does target humans making mistakes. Maybe someone sent a letter with the wrong information out to someone else and breached confidentiality that way, or maybe they put in their details in a phishing attack and they lost them that way. Either way, that's pretty much pretty much the entirety, 95% of all attack vectors. So that's why security awareness training is so effective. But how and what do we do? What options are there? We like WatchGuard's products, especially their DNS Watch, because it means that any traffic that runs through there, if it comes across a knowing phishing link, will actually push someone towards watching a video and seeing, what they can do in terms of learning about training when it happens. So you've clicked the wrong link, here's a video. And that we think that doing that immediate follow-up of a video and training really does get it at the right time. But certainly computer-based awareness training, where we send out emails with videos on and generally followed up by some sort of simulation exercise or a questionnaire or something like that is a pretty good way to do it. In-person training, we think, is less effective. It's not done often enough, and it generally takes up a huge amount of time, and people don't learn something out of that. Whereas we'd rather think that 5 minutes of training, every couple of weeks or once a month is going to be more of an impact than sitting down once a year for an hour and getting an in-person training. And we definitely make sure that security awareness is part of our monthly newsletters and notifications, and we actually encourage staff to pass on our encourage businesses to pass on our newsletter to their staff so that they can get a little bit more detail of what's going on and some up-to-date, issues and, attack vectors and how that may be affecting, the choices you make. And it's nice to see some of the examples that come across so you don't feel that you're being the only person that's been hit by it. So lastly, a few tips to help you out. We believe that leading from the top is important. We had a law firm that was breached earlier this week, and we helped them on Monday to get that breach under control. And at the same time, they've taken it as an opportunity to sit down with their staff and say, look, our director's actually the one who has done the breach. And at the same time, we make mistakes. We're all human, but these are the things we need to do. And that's been a really good proactive push to get them to be able to do the right thing before the breach has actually caused any issues. And at the time that data was lost. So it was just a username and password, but at the same time, it could be used in a matter of hours or days to attack the business. So we're quite happy that we caught it early and we're able to make those changes proactively. And we believe this leads into building a culture of security awareness. And that basically means that staff are just aware. A lot of projects these days in businesses, they know the impacts of the project, they know the cost of the project, they know the return on the investment, but we're hoping that people will start including security in those discussions as well. And we think that there just needs to be across the business. If somebody tailgates you or walks in behind you without swiping an ID into the building, that's something that should be brought up. This is something that people should be turning around and going, I'm sorry, I don't recognize you here. Do you have an ID? Or at least saying, I'm not sure of what's going on, and then asking someone else. That way they can build up their own knowledge, but it's all right to not know, and it's all right to be human and make mistakes. What we're trying to do is encourage people to learn from those and discuss what's going on. We also recommend implementing such things as WatchGuard DNS Watch, as it's fantastic and targets right at that moment. We also believe that making sure that you have a security awareness training plan in place that actually targets, it provides the information regularly to those staff as well, as also a benefit. And lastly, we think that a dark web monitoring service is the last resort that you need to know that you've actually been breached, because you may not even know that you've been attacked. The Parliamentary Commission 2 years ago lost 4,000 usernames and passwords when they were attacked, and they only knew about it when the Australian Security Directorate informed them that they'll put up for sale on the dark web. So we believe that these are safeguards that are a necessity to a business and provide that ability for you to know what's gone on after the fact, even if you don't know that you were actually breached. So that should give some idea of what businesses can do to make a positive impact to their business and get a bit of a feel for what the dark web is and what the impacts are for them. So I'm hoping that we've been able to uncover what the dark web is today and provide a bit more information that might be useful for people out there, and hopefully looking at security awareness training and why that may be useful to you. Certainly there's a lot of detail that can be in the security awareness training and what it includes, but generally we're looking at providing information on how people can get better with using password tools and increasing their maturity around the passwords they use, and also providing the necessary knowledge to look at things like, what's in an email address? Is it exactly right? Or does it look as though it came from someone else? Or does it even just have their name and the name that they received from? So we believe that, providing these details to staff is important.